D.Va was a character that had dominance through a couple different metas and often looked to as being a sore spot for the high-level community. D.Va was too strong, she did too many things, but my has the game changed over the course of a year. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at the state of D.Va, how she's gotten here, what Blizzard could do to improve her state, or if it's even possible or even desirable. Sometimes in Overwatch, unfortunately, some characters just have to be left in the dust to be an outlier in what is otherwise a pretty healthy meta, at least when you look at all skill tiers. At the highest tier of play, 6 heroes are only getting played, but if you look throughout all of the skill tiers, you can make arguments for at least niche usage for just about every hero, I think, except D.Va, kind of. The only reason you should ever consider using her right now is if you couldn't play one of the other tank heroes that can replicate a part of D.Va's playstyle. And her playstyle being broken up into pieces is important because one of the things that made D.Va oppressively too strong back in the day was that she had so many different modes of play, and at the time, she was kind of the Sigma who did everything, but now she's more or less a weaker version of that. What do I mean? Well, if you think back to when it was deemed that D.Va's defense matrix with 4 seconds was too oppressive, which, thinking back to that number, it probably was. Sounds like a long time. But they reworked her to be more offensively minded with more scarce defense matrix, giving her micro missiles that could shoot while she was flying, which started us down the road of seeing tanks that had a huge offensive play while still having massive defense for the team. So that when they made that change, despite her losing a lot of defense with defense matrix getting nerfed, she was way more lethal than she was before. D.Va having mobility means she could just dive onto whatever she wanted, press a button, and delete that thing. But she also somewhat retained the defensive playstyle, which I sort of describe as spinning plates. Okay, I love analogies. As a D.Va player, sort of maintaining, or I like the enforcer term, enforcing the backline, supporting the tank, and sort of weaving between teammates. Defense matrix can be played to deny offensive cooldowns, Tracer coming into your backline for a stick, halts coming in, follow up on Roadhog's hook. So she still had that dual nature, which made her strong for dive comps, made her strong for defensive bunker comps, made her strong for everything because she could flow in between whatever playstyle she wanted. And with a high amount of mobility and a I kill you button, she could roll up onto somebody, get a kill, and go back to protecting her team. But actually, you can make an argument that it's that exact flexibility that's holding D.Va back. Winston is pretty weak as a tank overall, but in the playable category, just because his mobility is so insane. Like, he's got a decent barrier, insane mobility, a tier above D.Va's, and because of that, he can go in on dives with Wrecking Ball and looks playable. Maybe not at the pro level, but if Ball Winston doesn't get hard countered or it outplays its counters, it's definitely playable and can beat a whole lot of things and punish a lot of bad positioning. But on the other end of things, in the sort of medium range, controlling the engagement, slow play style that D.Va also used to dominate through the management and protection of her team, well, that slower play is now far more dominated by the Orisa Sigma duo. So now, fast forward to today, both versions of her character are better suited to other playstyles. If you want to play for range poke, the only advantage D.Va provides is slightly more defense than Orisa Sigma. And either one of them can confirm kills so reliably that you're really dropping your offense if you try to put a D.Va in there. The only extreme niche circumstances I can see where that defense makes sense is like if you're on defense up against Orisa Hog, you can keep your main tank alive by baiting them to get halt hooked and saving them. And defense matrix can kind of equalize some of that stuff out, especially if they have other cooldowns like McCree or Ana as well. If they have a comp looking like that, the defense matrix has enough things to do that it's pretty good. But still, even in that case, you can do a big percentage of that with Sigma and still have the offense that he provides. If the enemy is playing full dive with Tracer, Winston, Ball, D.Va to answer it isn't too bad. D.Va's always brawled those two dive tanks pretty decently with her damage, and defense matrix being so flexible to save a teammate from dive can be pretty good. I think a lot of players think right away to go to Roadhog when a dive is succeeding, but actually the flexibility of DM to stop follow-up from far rockets or Tracer shooting one of your squishies while comboing with Pile Driver can be the only way you can flexibly turn and save that teammate. But there's so many other things that do that job better, whether it be Mei or just not needing that teammate, because you could play Sigma and kill things anyway. Like, oh, they go and kill a teammate, but if Sigma gets a kill and he lasts late into the fight, he's such a big threat that he's a DPS with a shield and he can clean up the late fight really well, and he might not need that teammate and can clutch out the fight anyway. That's the crazy thing with Sigma right now. And that's how Sigma is fundamentally broken in that way, where that he's a solo carry tank that also does main tank things. But again, it's only really hurting the highest level. So what can Blizzard do? The problem with expecting balance to dictate the highest level of play is that you can't nerf player skill, okay? So you can make something weaker overall for everybody, but if it's still going to be the most efficient way of playing when you maximize the amount of skill you can put in, it's not going to change the meta. That's the problem with expecting balance to change the meta. It always has been, always will be. And despite the high-level groans you're going to see with Orisa, Sigma, Mei, Hanzo, Baptiste, Zen being the best comp right now for the highest level of play, except for the few times you can put Pharah in the mix there. The fact of the matter is, all of these characters only get to that place when you play all of them pretty darn optimally, position great, and hit all of your shots, which is not something that most of the player base can replicate, which is why, for the most part, I really hope Blizzard settles into this patch, eases into it, okay? Even changes I want to see, I'm nervous about, because it very easily can turn into something else being oppressive, and the devil you know is always better. Having a high-tier meta comp that only the pros play is their problem, whereas if they overcorrect with balance just to force them to play something else, it becomes all of our problem immediately, and I don't want to see that. And the crazy thing to think back to this is that I don't know if even during the era where D.Va was, quote, broken for the highest tiers of play, if she really was broken for all players. Because the way I used to describe it is that D.Va is a character that scales well with teamwork, meaning that you have X amount of seconds of DM. If you put more coordination into that DM, you get more value out of it, right? Like, it's not something that you can just have out all the time. You have to manage it. And if your team is indecisive and you're just taking a ton of random poke, even back when D.Va was OP, she couldn't get a lot done without your team doing the right thing, or there being trade-offs there at least, right? So instead, what's happened at the highest tier is we've traded a super high teamwork related tank for a super high skills shot related tank. And this is where we as a community and Blizzard as developers have to think about, which reality do we want to live in? And I'm not sure I have the answer, you see, because I don't think either of these actually hurt the mainstream game, other than no matter what route you go, some character is going to be basically a must pick at the highest tiers, and simultaneously the counterpart might be horrifically unplayable for most players that play the game. And I think Sigma's in that category now, where both the skill floor and the skill ceiling are so high that he's both very difficult to pick up, but also has an insane amount of output at the highest levels, just individually. But D.Va worked a lot better as a approachable hero that a lot of players liked, and did a lot of maybe good to stabilize the game. I tried to warn about this at the time as well, but there was a lot of annoying spam, a lot of outrageous cooldowns like halt, that D.Va being so meta sort of just stopped from being oppressive. And as soon as you take D.Va out of the mix, these types of things start to look a lot more obnoxious, and the game starts being less about pathing and more about hitting those abilities, which is sort of the battle that Overwatch is having with itself, and one side has to win out. There's not really a world where both can coexist equally, and I think the Sigma D.Va duel is sort of the heart of that. Let's talk about ways that perhaps she could see a more healthy spot in the metagame. Well, one, I think, is if Mei gets a nerf, there's a chance that you can see D.Va look a bit better. The problem is, I don't know if it's ever going to be good enough for the highest tiers, because Defense Matrix doesn't eat Accretion Rock. I'm not saying it should, but between Mei Freeze and Accretion, D.Va can't play that aggressive dive style. And even if some of the things keeping her in check got weaker, I don't know if that ever comes to light to be playable again with all the escapes and how strong things are. Like, you need a Sigma level of damage or a Risa level of value with halt to kill a thing with a tank. The micro missiles dive is a thing of the past. It only works if the enemy has bad positioning and gets caught out. So that's never going to be a thing at the highest levels. They're too prepared for those types of engagements. arguments. So the other route you could go is, should D.Va be better at defense? But if you go too far in that direction, then she just leapfrogs Sigma and becomes the I do everything tank again, where she still won't be able to dive as hard, but if DM is crazy good and it just makes your team invincible against most things, the entire game is rewritten. And although she might not be survivable on the dive and be exploitable, she can still ferry in teammates, and perhaps Defense Matrix just outdoes so many of the things that are seeing insane value right now. Like, think Orisa Halt into Hanzo Pull, or Pull into Batiste Window, or May Blizzard. D.Va having Defense Matrix to eat all of these things, if it was abundant as a resource, all of that would look differently, I think. Whether D.Va can dive or play defensively, it's just, there's no way that would stay the same, in my opinion, if they just buffed Defense Matrix to a high level. So let's look through D.Va's kit and talk about areas they could consider buffing and what the ramifications of that would be. If you wanted to try to make her more lethal as a diver, similar to the power level that Wrecking Ball has, or even to the playable state Winston's in, you might need D.Va's ability to move to be at a bit more of an outrageous level. Winston's leap goes really far, and Wrecking Ball's mobility has always been just nutty. D.Va's thrusters, in comparison, aren't strong enough to make plays around all the defense that exists in the game. Ball and Winston barely can, right? D.Va would either need a speed increase or a distance on her thrusters increase, allowing her to do much more obnoxious movement. That would strengthen her ability to go in and dive a target if the kill shot distance was extended. Because right now, as D.Va, if you see like a Zenyatta on the high ground, a little ways off from you, you can hit the thrusters at a certain distance, fly towards him, kick on the micro missiles, and by the time you reach him at the perfect distance, the full combo comes through and you just delete him from existence. A buff like that would make Pharah probably unplayable, but a lot of these buffs may do that. But that's one route they could go. Other things you can look at, again, I don't think any of these ideas are really good, but you could buff her range of her weapons. She's never been good at poke, but that used to not matter. But now that tanks are good at poke, it's going to be really hard to beat that out. Flat buffs that damage, though, are pretty lame, and they just sort of force characters upwards, and that would break the game as well. Another thing that I thought about is Sigma's ability to have a mini defense matrix that buffs him is a really big deal. And because they buffed that cooldown recently, Sigma becomes outrageously strong when he gets a good kinetic grasp off. I mean, he gets 700 plus life reliably. And it doesn't even feel hard to do it, in my opinion, just jumping in front, grabbing some damage. He's sort of like Zarya in that way, where he gets stronger over time. He just does. So it allows him to face tank more. It allows him to press angles to get into positions to use accretion and hit his hyperspheres way more than he otherwise would. He doesn't feel like a glass tank now if you're able to get good value out of grasp. And D.Va, in comparison, Defense Matrix just isn't as good, and she does less damage. So they could try to do some sort of conversion ratio with damage getting eaten, either giving her armor or damage or extra range or resetting her micro missiles, that kind of thing. There would need to be some kind of incentive to mirror what Sigma can do, but that's a boring buff, right? Like, that describes the problem, but it's sort of a lame solution. But it's at the heart of where the game's at now. At the highest tiers of play, your character needs to have a high skill cap and do a lot of things. And at most tiers of play, you at least need to do one thing really well. And if you do that, then you're playable on a lot of maps, a lot of contexts. But because D.Va is decent at a lot of things, she doesn't fit in either category. And the funny thing is, I know a lot of people are going to suggest reverting some of the old Defense Matrix nerfs, but I don't even think that would be enough. Like, if she had more range on Defense Matrix, or if it came up faster, or if she had 4 seconds of it, I don't know if any of these things matter, unless that got to an overpowered degree. Again, maybe if you reverted all of it and she both had micro missiles and 4 seconds of DM with 1 second of cooldown in between them, then the amount of coverage you could give might outweigh the skill cap of Sigma. But I'm still not sure, because think of it this way, like, Sigma is a character that just rolls up on squishies and kills them instantly, just like D.Va, but also has ranged poke and a better ultimate. and a stun. This is the core problem that I don't really have any good solutions for, because buffing D.Va, there's a chance that it only affects middle tiers of play and still doesn't affect the highest tier. There's a chance that happens. The only way to get her up at the highest tiers of play is to make her broken, and anything short of that might just break her for the average player while not shaking up the highest tier at all. So this is a crazy impossible problem, guys, and it'll be interesting to read your comments down in the comments section about what the player base even wants out of the game. There's a lot of players that love playing D.Va, and I contend that the high level meta is a problem of format. It's a problem of ultimates. It's got a whole lot of problems. It's not a balance problem, because no matter what balance we've ever had, we've always had a top tier comp and then maybe one or two other alternate swaps where one hero comes out, but maybe they're still kind of mostly playing the same comp, or a pure counter comp gets mastered. But very rarely do you see anything more than that at the highest tier with the format we have. I think ult reset on checkpoint would help. Obviously, hero bans would take a giant leap. And those are the things I think we should look to try to fix the high tier stagnant meta problem, rather than just breaking the game for everybody else every 6 months. Despite D.Va being really weak, I think tons of strategies are really good, and the balance for the game is about as good as you can ever dream of in Overwatch. It doesn't get much better than this, for the average player anyway. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out. Let's know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, hit the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. See you guys next time.